Well, good evening. My name is Mitch Weisberg. I'm here with Edchat Interactive, and I'd like to welcome you to our session tonight, which is going to be with Nancy Mangum and Shayla Rexrode of the Friday Institute. The title of tonight's session is Empowering Students and Learner Agency. And unfortunately, on the slide, I put in the title of, I think, what the next session is. Before bringing up Shayla and Nancy, I think I'll just take a second and go through a little bit about Edchat Interactive and the platform that we're using. Edchat Interactive is designed to allow really educators to share best practices, but to do it in a form that's a lot more conducive to adult learning than the typical webinar. So we encourage people who come here to interact with each other, to reflect, to participate. And we do that by using a platform called Shindig. And because Shindig is different from other platforms, I'll just spend a little bit of time on it for those of you who haven't seen it before. You'll notice that there's a menu of icons on the bottom of your screen, one of which is text chat. This is a way that you can, by text, interact with the other people who are here tonight. So if you click on text chat, and please do, that's going to open up a dialog box. And let me, for a moment, let me make this full screen. Hopefully that's full screen for you, or easier for you to see. But it opens up a dialog box, and I'll maybe make it a little smaller again. And you can type in. Why don't you type in something like "introduce yourself" and type in a question for for our leaders tonight, something that you'd like to learn. And this is a good way of getting going and introducing yourself to the other people here. The one person who can't see what you're typing in is me, but Shayla and Nancy can, and they can respond. So that's the first way. And I should also say that you can close the text chat on the top right-hand corner there, or you can grab and move it if it's over one of the slides and you want to move it. So that's the first way of interacting. The second way of interacting is there's a question mark. Question mark, it allows you to ask a question. That question goes to me. If it's a technical question, I can answer it. Maybe I can answer a few other questions, but I'll pass the question to Shayla and Nancy. But you could just use the text chat to ask them a question directly if you want to. The third way of interacting is raising your hand. There's going to be times where we ask, who has an example of doing this in your school? Or who has a question that you want to talk about with everybody? And if you click on that raise hand avatar, we know that you're willing to be brought up on stage, and we'll bring you up and you can have a conversation with Shayla and Nancy and maybe me. There's a mute microphone, so if you're individually talking with somebody and there's some feedback on the line, you can mute your microphone so that there isn't any feedback. And the final way of interacting on Shindig is to click on the avatar of another person. And if you click on that person's avatar, you're going to be pulled together with that person, and you can have a private conversation with that person. So, I might encourage you to do that now. And you could do that also. You can click on Shayla or Nancy as well. Click on the avatar of another person here and talk, and introduce yourself and talk about some of the things that you're hoping to learn today, what you teach, what kind of school you're in. And then when you're done, you can click on the X to the top right-hand corner, and that's going to allow you to disconnect from that other person. So I'm going to pull myself down to give you a chance to talk to each other for a minute. And in about a minute, I'll bring myself back up. Number of you have formed groups, which is perfect. And now let me just talk a little bit about what's coming up. On March 6th is going to be the third in our series with the Friday Institute, where we're going to be talking about personalized professional learning. And then on March 7th coming up, we're going to have a recap or a deep dive into the Edchat Twitter chat. Tuesday nights is from 7 o'clock Eastern time on Twitter is the Edchat Twitter chat. And Tom Whitby is going to be calling some of the questions and issues raised on the March 6th Twitter chat. And then we're inviting people to come up and discuss with him and me some of the topics that will be discussed on the 6th. And we never know what those topics are in advance because the questions get decided on the day before. So we did that. We did that last week, and it was an interesting conversation. We have the archives of that posted on our website. So feel free to register for the March 7th one. And please come to March 6th with Nancy, Shayla, and Marianne. And let me now bring up Shayla and Nancy. So here is Shayla. And let me find Nancy. And okay.
Everybody.
Hey, Shayla.
Yeah.
I love those glasses.
I was sharing
those hearts
earlier. They are hearts, and what you might not be able to see for some of you are my Mardi Gras beads. I shared that I was doing a session earlier today with a group of coaches, and I could not resist taking advantage of the fact that today is Mardi Gras. Also, it's Valentine's Eve. So as someone in my group session said this evening, happy Valengras Day. I hope everybody is having an amazing day, and we are absolutely thrilled that you could join us this evening. For those of you who joined us for session 1, welcome back. Thrilled to see you again. For those of you just joining us for the first time, as I mentioned, my name is Shayla Rexrode. I am one of the senior facilitators at the Friday Institute, and I have the amazing job, which I even struggle to even call it a job because it's just so much fun every day, where I get to work with an amazing group of individuals where we do nothing but research and talk to educators like yourselves, go into schools, talk to students, and really take a deep dive into what are some of those issues and challenges that are potentially barriers to our inability to really be innovative and to make progress with our students in the classroom. And then we bring all those ideas back to the Friday Institute and redeliver into sessions like tonight, where we get to focus on topics that we know are really important to you, but that we also know are very research-based and founded in that research. So we are excited tonight to be focusing on a topic that is very near and dear to me, which is empowering students and learner agency. So we really hope that you enjoy the webinar this evening. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Nancy, who's going to introduce herself and kick off the discussion for us this evening.
Yes. How's everybody doing tonight? I hope you're doing well, and it's great to see you. Like Shayla said, I'm Nancy Mangum, and I am the Associate Director of Digital Learning Programs. I'm excited to be back. Again, I love this platform. Susan and I were just talking about what a great platform this is. So we are excited to be back. Shayla talked a little bit about our role at the Friday Institute, but just really quickly, we are part of NC State University. And we like to say at the Friday Institute, we combine research, policy, and practice. So, but the mission of the Friday Institute is to improve education through innovations. And so we work with all K-12, even though we are part of NC State University. And so, Mitch, I think we'll head to the Code of Cooperation just really quickly. We always like to start with a Code of Cooperation. And so we will end on time. And like Mitch said, we really want to make sure that you're talking with each other, having those conversations, and being able to learn from each other, as well as the things that we're sharing. With that, our goals for the session tonight are helping teachers move in this direction. So I think you'll hopefully be able to take away some tangible strategies that you can use to help your teachers. And then we also want to talk about maybe some successful and implementation stories and how we've seen learner agency developed. So those are our goals tonight. We don't have a lot of time, but we will, I think we have a lot of great things planned. With that, I just want to mention that my colleague at the Friday Institute, Marianne, and I just recently published a book called Leading Personalized and Digital Learning, a Framework for Implementing School Change. And you'll notice that within our framework, within the book, we looked at 10 schools across the country that are really, that we believe are personalizing learning for students and using digital tools. And we looked at what made them successful and some of the key strategies. And so we put those together, and you see those strategies there with that lollipop. We call it the lollipop graphic. But those strategies there. And you'll notice that one of the key strategies in leading that implementing school change is the learner agency. And so that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. As we look at the next slide, learner agency isn't really a new concept. We've been talking about it for a long time, and even dating back to Socrates, right? With this quote, but over time, we've kind of maybe it's gotten lost in translation, and we know that our testing obsession or our obsession with data and making sure that we are serving all students well has maybe blinded us a little bit or gotten us away from this idea about learner agency. And so we know that there's been a resurgence over the past few years, and maybe some of us never lost it, I guess. But learner agency isn't something new. And Shayla and I love this quote because I think this is really what we want to do with students. This is why we went into education. We want to kindle the flame, and we want to, kind of start that spark. And so anyways, we thought this was a great way to start. On the next slide, this question is really our overarching question for tonight. How do we empower students to want to own their own learning? And this is really our key or our essential question. And as we think about learner agency, this is really what we want to do. So on the next slide, there are a couple questions here, and we want you to think about a time in your own educational experience when you were a teacher. When you had a teacher or someone who empowered you to own your own learning. So I want you to think back when you were a student. It could have also been now, currently, maybe you went through a great professional learning experience, but think about a time when somebody really encouraged you to own your own learning. And I want you to get together with another person. So maybe just partners, or if we need a triad, we can do that. But share that opportunity. When were you empowered, and how did that make you feel? And then maybe also, how did the person help to empower you? What strategies did they use? We'll give you just a couple minutes to find a partner and talk about those key questions.
So this is the time to partner up with somebody, click on somebody's avatar, and talk about these questions. You can also use that chat window. So if you don't have a microphone, you can still respond via text, and everybody will see that, and they can respond to you via text. And you can have more than two people in a conversation also. So you're not limited to just two people. I'll pull myself down, and we'll all come back up in a minute or two.
Right. So now that I think everybody, we're back together now as a group. Now that you've had a chance to kind of think about your own learning experience and maybe a time that you were empowered, I think that's always nice to kind of activate our own thinking and think about what it felt like for us to be empowered. So let's move on and let's kind of begin to talk a little bit more about what is learner agency. Like I said, we've kind of been throwing this term around, learner agency, but we kind of need to understand why it's important. So on the next slide, I love this. Harvard professor Roland Barthes, in the 1950s, he noted that when people left high school, they were typically knew about 75% of what they needed to know to be successful in life. So the 1950s, when students graduated, they knew about 75% of what they needed to know. But on the next slide, we see that today, Barthes predicts that when people graduate, they only know about 2% of what they will need to know. That's pretty astonishing, only 2%. So pretty amazing there as we think about it. This kind of gives us fuel. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why learner agency is important, but I think this one statistic really helps us to understand and maybe drives us even closer towards learner agency and understanding why we need learner agency. So on the next slide, we think about as we think about what is learner agency, Shayla said it. I've been talking a lot about learner agency, but we want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we think about this. So, learner agency really means that students have ownership and ability to drive their own instruction and really their own learning. That's what we're looking for. That students believe that they can complete a task, and they also believe that when they follow through with things, that they can get anything that they need in order to be successful. So it's really that ownership is really key. We also, in order to have learner agency in our schools, have to involve students in decision making. And while it's important to do things like give students choices on which book they read, that isn't total learner agency. That might be one step towards it, but it's really going further. It's involving students in their own learning, making them a partner. So if we really think about that partnership, that's what learner agency is. On the next slide, this is a great piece of research that we found, and it's a really long study. But what we found, those 7 elements there, we pulled those out because those, I think, really help teachers. You all are all here. You obviously think learner agency is important, or you know that it is, or you're curious about what it is. But we have to help teachers understand what learner agency is and how they can begin to use it in their classroom. And so when we look at these 7 things, I think this really helps us to understand what learner agency is. And, I think back to my teaching days when I was teaching kindergarten. And when I think I did a really good job of probably a lot of these things when I taught kindergarten. But a few years later, when I was teaching 5th grade, I don't know that other than the first few weeks of school, that I was really doing a good job with all of these things. Again, the first thing, growth mindset. Are we helping students to say, I can learn? The self-efficacy is students need to be able to say, I can do this. And you see the list goes on and on there. I think number 5 is really important to point out, the goal setting and management. Students need to be involved with these are my goals and I know that I can reach them. So I think all 7 of these are really important as we think about what is learner agency, but then also how do we help teachers understand what it is and how can they begin to use these in their classroom. Shayla, is there anything else there that you wanted to add?
No, I think that's perfect. And I would agree from my own teaching experience. It was very similar. I touched on them very early on, but then I would kind of fade away as the year progressed. And I became so honed in on the standards that I kind of forgot about the actual learning experience for my students.
Okay, great. Yeah. And, on the next slide, we see research also shows us that when students believe that they are likely to succeed in meeting the standards within a class, they're much more likely to persevere. And you might say, well, yeah, Nancy, of course, of course that's true. But I think we really have to think about that. Do all of my students believe that they can succeed? And so, how are we as teachers making sure that they do believe that? And how are we kind of checking in to make sure? This is especially important as students get older in middle and high school when we're looking at dropout. Students that don't believe that they actually have a chance to succeed or be successful in a class, they won't persevere, and oftentimes they'll become our dropouts. And so I just think it's just another reason why learner agency is so important. And it isn't just the fluff; it isn't just the thing that's extra or the feel good stuff. It's important for all of us, and research shows us that. So, if we believe that those 7 things are important, if we believe that learner agency is important, how do we begin to help teachers move in that direction? Like I noted, those 7 statements can help us, but there are also some other things that we find as we help teachers and to move in this direction of learner agency. So you'll notice on the next slide, Barbara Bray and Kathleen McClaskey. We didn't put Kathleen's name on there, although we should have. I apologize for that. But they have 3 continuums. Anybody, raise your hand if you've seen these before or are familiar with these continuums. Okay. All right. Shayla put the slides in a link to those in the chat. So if you want to open those up, but and Mitch, if you'll go down 2 slides to the first continuum there. So they have 3 continuums. The first is the continuum of choice. The next one is the continuum of voice. And then the last one is the continuum of engagement. And kind of to sum up what Bray and McClaskey say is that these 3 things, choice, voice, and engagement, are really at the heart of how we get teachers to lead that learner agency within the classroom. So you have 3 continuums there. I think you should have, if you clicked on the link that Shayla put in the slide deck, or in the chat, it should bring you up to a slide deck that have these 3 so that you can toggle between them yourself. And on the next slide, we have a question for you. We're just curious, what really resonates with you as you look at these continuums, and also what challenges you? So what we would like for you to do, and hopefully this will work, you have the slides and you can go back and forth and kind of look at them as you talk to a partner. The continuum of voice, the continuum of choice, and the continuum of engagement. So we want you to partner up with somebody else or a triad and have a conversation. What resonates with you about these and what challenges you? And how do you think you would help teachers begin to use these in your classroom? And we'll give you maybe about 3 or 4 minutes to have those conversations. And Shayla and I will pop in and see how you're doing. All right, great. So hopefully you had a good conversation. And I'm sorry, I think I missed a couple of your hands that you all are familiar with these continuums. So I'm curious, would somebody be brave enough to come up and share some of your thoughts about these? Anybody want to share? We have a brave soul on this tonight that will come up and share. We don't want to have to volunteer anyone.
So it's actually quite fun, but I guess I could get it started. I'm looking at the continuum of choice, and I see entrepreneur, and I'm just wondering, about the idea of why the term entrepreneur for that as the highest level. Do you know why she might have chosen the word entrepreneur?
I actually don't know why she chose that. Although I think that it's somebody who, if we think about what an entrepreneur does, they go out and they look for, they create their own opportunities is how I would, I don't know how Webster would define entrepreneur, but to me, that's what I think of an entrepreneur. They're going out and they're creating their own opportunities. And so I think as we look at this continuum of choice and we think about this, from moving from left to right, the student starts as just a participant, but then they begin to design, and then they advocate for themselves. And then lastly, they would go out and they would be looking for their own opportunities to learn new things.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to bring myself down because it looks like we have somebody who has something interesting to say. So let me bring him up. This will be Jesse.
For starting us off.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm looking at the teacher-centered, learner-driven continuum of choice, and what resonated with me was not only the 5 different stages from teacher to teacher to learner to learner to learner, from participant all the way to entrepreneur. One of the things I gathered was the idea of ownership. So that really stood out to me. When somebody is going to learn something new, whether it's skateboarding or surfing, they're going to start out as a participant, and they're going to fall and they're going to fail forward, and then they're hopefully going to design a way that's going to skateboard for them, or what's going to help them get the right skateboard, get the right surfing tools, get the right wax and everything, and hopefully become an advocate for that, and then become an entrepreneur in that they'll have new waves to catch, they'll have new ways to surf, So
Yeah.
I really like that idea. This is such a beautiful chart, and I kind of want to print it out and give it to all of our campuses and be like, let's look at this here. It's different. I like it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and Jesse, it's something that we really find that resonates with teachers, because it does help them to see, okay, this isn't this thing learner agency, and really learner agency is the driver for personalized learning, right? So when we think about personalized learning and we think about that learner agency,
Mhm.
this kind of gives us some concrete things that we can be doing as a teacher. So maybe I can allow students to choose topics. And things that are interesting to them as they study, or as we move forward. So I think it really does scaffold. And I'm
Yeah.
glad that this resonates with you. I think in the same way, the voice and the engagement, they do a
Mhm.
really nice job of those as well. And of course, the graphics, or the kid friendly, also makes it appealing, and
Yes.
doesn't seem so intimidating as if it was just
No.
text. So I think that's
Mhm.
great. I have had principals and school leaders, coaches, say to me that they have cut these up and asked teachers to think about, so how would you put these in order moving, if we were thinking about more of a teacher centered to a
Okay.
learner driven classroom, and where would you put these? You know, so just kind of, that's also just another idea if you're leading professional development, or you're thinking
Yeah.
about how you might use these or introduce these. They've cut up the pieces
Right.
and put them into an envelope, and had teachers kind of look at it in that way and have the discussion about if we were talking about the continuum of choice, how would we line these up, or the continuum of voice or
Mhm.
engagement. Great. So thank you for sharing.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you very much. So we're going to
All right.
transition. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I think with that, even though we could probably spend a whole night just talking about these three, I think we want to give you some more tangible strategies. So with that, I'm going to throw it to Shayla.
Yeah. So, what we're going to take a little bit of a dive into for the last part of our time together is recognizing that it's one thing for teachers to kind of grasp and understand the importance of learner agency. It's another for them to start to think about how it might look in their classroom. But also recognizing, if you have ever been in that coaching capacity or in the leadership capacity, it's about baby steps. It's equipping them with certain things that they can take back and not only reflect on, but actually start to model into their classroom. So the next slide that we're going to take a look at, this was again from another article that we came across, and we kind of provided the article at the bottom if you want to take a look at it later on. It is a fairly lengthy article, but the component that we pulled that really, really resonated with me were these 10 powerful questions. And these are questions that I would put in front of a teacher just to help them stop and really, again, reflect on what is the environment or the culture that they are creating in their classroom. And have they already started to take the steps to providing a culture that will support learner agency? So I'm not necessarily going to read through all 10 questions, but it's really those big questions of, do they know every learner's story? Have they taken the time to sit with every student in their class or every student that they interact with in a given day, and really kind of had that conversation with the student of, how do they learn? How do they like to learn? Where do they like to learn? What do they like to learn? But also, what do they believe about learning? Again, I think that answer is going to vary depending on the age, but it's also an interesting dynamic to look at. At an elementary age, for a lot of students, they love learning. As they get into middle and high school, it's more, well, I do it because I'm told I have to do it. Where does that transition start to happen? And starting to probe a little bit more with the students to understand, where does that belief come from? And do they believe in themselves? Do they truly believe that they can achieve? Back to that earlier quote that Nancy shared. But also getting into the teacher reflecting on who ultimately holds the power in the classroom. And even if the teacher doesn't believe that they possess the power, how do the students perceive that culture? Do they perceive that the teacher is really the one in charge of the entire learning experience from the second they walk through the door? Who owns the curriculum? What is the language of your classroom? Again, going back to that very first statement that Nancy shared around learner agency, of that growth mindset. is that have you started to cultivate a culture where teachers are having the conversations with the students about failure, and that failure is not necessarily a horrible thing? And have they started to talk to them about risk taking? Have they started to really introduce an inquiry-based classroom where they encourage the students to ask questions and to probe a little bit deeper into things that they want to learn a little bit more about? So again, I just thought this was a really great 10 question series to kind of not only for yourselves reflect on, but again, if you are in that capacity of supporting teachers, some things to start to put in front of them to get that process started.
So the reason I popped up, sorry, is like I was looking at these, and like the thing that was going in my mind is that especially the first 4 questions here, there's a huge difference between teaching a subject and teaching kids. And, these questions really are about, okay, we're teaching kids and we happen to be teaching them particular subjects. So it's not a matter of getting through the material. It's a matter of igniting the kids and getting them interested. And it's just like, if we can, as educators or as professional developers, if we can instill in teachers that this is that this is really their calling, I'm thinking that's really the crux of your first 4 questions, right?
Absolutely. And these are even questions that I encourage teachers in professional development sessions to reflect on when they think back to their own educational experience. What was their experience and like, and what do they wish maybe, or how do they wish it might have been a little different? And what are things that they can start to do in their own classrooms to ensure that their students maybe have a different learning experience, or if they had an amazing learning experience, how do they model and replicate that back into their own classrooms? Absolutely. So as we transition, we now, again, as Nancy said, she and I could talk for hours about different things that you could start to introduce into the classroom to really start to model that idea of learner agency. But we wanted to really equip you with 4 specific things that you might consider, either if you're a classroom teacher, introducing yourself, if you are in that coaching or professional support capacity, thinking about things that you could go back and maybe team up with a small group of teachers. Or if you're at the district level, start to think about how you can incorporate this into your own professional learning. So the first one that we'll take a look at is the student learning map. And I tried to provide kind of a graphical image as well as kind of some steps and some verbiage to kind of better understand what a student learning map and the purposes behind it. And it's kind of a 2-phase process that we would encourage you to take. The first is allowing the teachers to, and they can start by just doing it with a sample student, or they could actually identify a student that they are currently working with. And as the image kind of shows, they literally draw arrows and start to map out every single individual that interacts with that student, everything down from the second that they maybe that they get out of the parking lot. Every single person that they potentially interact with in a given day and the role of that individual. Is it to simply transport them to school, but also thinking about, is that bus driver providing them with an environment where they feel like they're going to be successful for that day? And it really is a great way to just look at the whole student and to look at their entire learning experience and not just the time that they may spend with you in your classroom. And then the second phase would be, once you as a teacher feel really comfortable with this process, empowering the students to start to do their own student learning map. And this is really where it's that eye-opening experience for a lot of educators, when you empower a student to think about who is everybody that impacts their learning experience on a daily basis and what is the role of that person. But then where it really becomes powerful is when you start to ask them, well, are there things that are missing in your day? And what role would that person have? It may not be a specific individual in the school that they know of. It could be more of a, well, I would really love an opportunity to talk a little bit more about how I feel on the recess when I'm left out. So it could really be that social and emotional aspect. It could simply be, I really don't feel like I can be successful in math. So it's starting to look across the school and look at, well, who are other individuals that we could introduce into their learning map to help them feel that they could achieve those challenges. I've actually had the opportunity to visit some schools where they really have taken Learning Map to the next level. And whenever I go into like a data room, instead of it just being the stats on a student and just a name with an achievement level, there's now pictures of student learning maps beside every single student. And they really take that deep dive into knowing every single student and how they learn, and then looking to see, is the data matching up? And if not, going back to their learning map and again identifying what else needs to be incorporated into their day for them to feel successful. The next one that we'll take a look at is one that is relatively new to me. I know Nancy has utilized it quite a bit. I actually went through the process myself. This is actually currently a free digital resource, and it's Learner Sketch. And what it allows you to do, and for students to do as well, is it takes you through a series of about 8 screens. And I took a screenshot of what one of the screens looks like, where you start to sort the various icons through the middle, the different conversation bubbles into, yes, that's absolutely my learning style, or it's not me. And each slide is a different perspective on your learning. Some is very social emotional, some is more like on a day-to-day when you're actually sitting down by yourself working. Some are questions about how you learn in a large environment like a classroom space. But when you complete all 8 of the kind of questionnaire bulletin boards, at the end, it brings you to the slide that you can see to the right, where it allows you to click on either explore, strategies, plan, or the very last one I've got, where it gives you, and it starts to walk you through, based on your learning style, different ways that you can better explore your own learning. Some strategies to help you enhance your learning experience, how to start to develop a plan to kind of map out how you can best learn and how you can start to fill in gaps where maybe you didn't feel like you were as strong in a particular area. So again, it's one that even if you just do it for yourself, I was truly fascinated when I did it for myself and kind of looked at what they recommended. It kind of just made me stop and go, oh, never really thought about that before. But I can only start to imagine giving this to students and allowing them that opportunity to get that process started for themselves. The next one is one that I would venture to say a lot of you have probably participated in some type of space redesign. But most of the time when we go into sessions and we talk to individuals about space redesign, they tend to err more on the side of flexible spacing with furniture. And a lot of times you see the conversation go towards, what type of new furniture should we buy? And is it comfortable furniture? And is it colorful furniture? But the point that we wanted to drive across with this particular activity or strategy is when you're looking at space redesign around learner agency, the actual furniture itself is a very small component. It's really stopping to look at the entire instructional space that a student interacts with, everything from the second they walk through the door, and really kind of walking through every part of a learning space and looking at the structure of that space. A lot of times when I go into a classroom, I will start by looking at the ceiling all the way down to the floor. And are there items hanging from the ceiling that could potentially be a distraction for some students, or items that don't necessarily help a student see how they are a part of the learning process? Bulletin boards. Are a majority of the bulletin boards in the classroom teacher-driven? Are they truly spaces where the students are dictating what information is going up on the bulletin boards? And are they seeing opportunities where students maybe didn't get 100% on an assessment, but maybe they got a C? But that teacher's, again, enforcing that growth mindset of, well, just not yet, and allowing the students to maybe trade out that work over time as they continue to learn and grow themselves as a learner. But also down to, are there spaces where students can work privately, where they can be with a partner, where they can work in collaborative groups? So again, in that respect, you might look more at the furniture. But again, we don't want to reinforce that it's always about buying new furniture. Sometimes it's just the positioning of the furniture around the room. But again, a lot of this goes back to talking to the students and their opportunity for voice. and choice, and to be able to express to the teachers how they learn best, and for the teacher to work the best that they can to accommodate that type of learning style in the classroom. And then the last option that we wanted to provide, which again, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Genius Hour. And to be honest with you, I put up the term Genius Hour because it is the most common term that a lot of people can associate with. But as you'll see as the very first start, we encourage you to call it, or to work with teachers, or if you're a classroom teacher, to really have the students decide, what do we want to call this block of time? How frequently do we want to have this block of time where students truly get to explore anything that they want to learn more about? And we recognize that for some teachers, that initial just letting the students go out and learn about anything can be a little unnerving. So in the beginning, teachers might, absolutely work with the students on that code of cooperation. What are the expectations of the teacher, and what are the expectations of the students during this time? And what should the time look like? What are some potential things that they might choose to explore that, again, are enhancing their learning opportunity? And again, I just kind of tried to position a couple of questions to help you get started as you yourself are developing a Genius Hour, or you're working with a team of teachers, but to also think about, well, who's going to support it? And not just support it in that block of time, but who's going to think about those ideas that students really want to continue to explore beyond that time? What types of environments, what types of spaces, going back to redesign, are going to be available for them to go and continue to learn and grow? What professional development will the teachers need in order to help them understand the benefits and how to incorporate something like Genius Hour into their instructional time? How will it be positioned and promoted to the teachers, to the parents, to the community? A lot of people could easily look at things like this as, oh, that's not aligned to standards. How is it possibly going to help the students be prepared for the end of the year assessment? And again, it's thinking through all that and really positioning it into a way that parents and community members can also understand the benefits of a learner when they feel empowered to explore their own learning and to explore topics of interest to them. It really can change their entire attitude about school. And how often will students be provided the time? Again, there's a lot of information out there around Genius Hour. I don't know how many of you are familiar with John Spencer. I know we're not able to provide the link through the presentation, but if you go out to YouTube and just look for John Spencer Genius Hour, he has a great, really quick animated video. There's a screenshot of it to the right where he just very simplistically explains what Genius Hour is, but then he kind of breaks it down into some things to consider if this is something that you potentially want to introduce into your school or into your individual classrooms. So I recognize that was potentially a lot of information and a lot to kind of process. Again, taking a look at student learning maps, the learner sketch, the space redesign, or potentially the option for a Genius Hour. So we did want to have one last opportunity just for you to reflect and kind of share a little bit. So as we move to the next slide, if you don't mind selecting another partner, or again, from something that you learned or something that you might take back in order to support and help develop agency back in your learning environment. And more importantly, are there things that you are already doing that support learner agency that we could all learn from? The first thing Nancy and I will tell you is we are by no means experts in these areas. We beg, borrow, and steal all the time. We love hearing from educators like yourselves that are in the field doing it every day. So take an opportunity to find a partner or a triad. Just take a minute or two. I know we're nearing the end of our hour, but just share for a minute something that really resonated with you, that aha, and or something that you personally are doing that you think would be beneficial for others to learn from. So take a second, find your partner, and then we'll bring you back together in just a minute and wrap things up.
All right, great.
Fantastic. I know that we're nearing the end of the hour, but do we have anyone who would like to share anything that maybe you shared with your partner or that you heard from your partner that you think would be really great to share out with the group? And if you're not maybe as comfortable like sharing out a whole the group, again, take advantage of the chat window. post anything into the chat window that maybe came up in your conversation, or any questions that you may have that really challenged you that you want Nancy and I to address.
I'm going to bring Jesse back up again in a second because he volunteered. But I had just a question: is that do you go into those techniques in greater depth at all in your Leading Personalized Digital Learning book?
Oh, Nancy,
and
do you want to address that one?
Yeah, and you're muted, Nancy. So
we do have some of those topics. We definitely address Genius Hour and in there and share some strategies, because some of our 10 schools definitely use that. And one of them, I love this, they talked about it as far as passion. So the passion project, which I loved hearing. We went into and visited the schools, and those 5-year-olds talking about, this is what I'm passionate about, was pretty awesome. So yes, we do address some of those, although some of those, I love the idea of the student learning map. That's a great new one that I haven't seen used in a school until actually Shayla brought that to our attention. And so I love that idea. But we talk about some of those in our book. So thank you, Mitch.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jesse,
yes,
sorry, Shayla, you go.
Curious to hear what you talked about with your partner, or what you would like to share out with the group.
Definitely. I met up with Susan from Florida, and one of the things that was an aha moment for me was the learner sketch. I'd never seen anything like that. I do feel like that's something that the teacher can do, but also have the students do at the high school level, junior high level, and have the students do this day one, or when they start a new section of students coming in. And I think teachers can start building almost like a portfolio of how certain students are learning, and it'll make them a better teacher and make the students feel like they're not so alone too. And they can see them hopefully evolve into that entrepreneurial, level that we're trying to get them to. So I do think that was a huge moment for me. I even wrote the website down, qedfoundation.org. So I'm going to definitely look at that.
Fantastic. Thank you. And one other thing that I would, is I've introduced this to teachers or even coaches like yourself. I've said, absolutely do this your first interaction with the students or that first week, but then build it in periodically, like maybe each quarter or 2 or 3 times during the year, to let the students go back and do it again to see, does their learning pattern change? And are there things that they would maybe shift to another category based on the environment that the teachers provided for them? Because I think learning for everyone is an evolving process, and we don't always continue to learn the exact same way. So it might be also an interesting conversation for students to start to have in partner groups of maybe how their learning style is progressing or changing over time.
Good point. I like that.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Jesse, we have a couple more things I think we're going to share, a couple of our last slides, but there's another thing that if you were excited about that you might be excited about the next thing that Shayla's going to share, the Students Lead course.
Yes, this is something that we are really excited to share. I think this is the first kind of national platform that we've been on where we've really been able to kind of shout from the rooftops what we have available. We spent last year piloting this with a group of students, but now it's available across the country and for anybody really who has access to our website. But it is a new course designed specifically for students ages 13 to 18, so the kind of that middle grades to high school level. And it takes about 6 to 8 hours for a student to sit down and work through. Again, they can work at their own pace, so they can do chunks at a time. It's absolutely free for them to participate. And over the course of the content, it really helps them to start to identify their learning style and also start to equip them with developing their own plan for how they are going to empower themselves to learn. But another nice feature is that as the teacher, you do go out and register your students, But by registering your students, we also provide you with a whole series of resources and lesson ideas. Again, going back to how do they continue to support the culture that kind of runs in parallel with the students as they're going through the course. So it's a course that we are extremely excited about. It is currently available. It's just studentslead.fi.ncsu.edu. We would encourage you to take a look at it, share it out. And as always, we love any and all feedback that we can get on the things that we're providing for students. And as we kind of round out the evening, we did want to kind of wrap up with another great quote. And again, it's bringing it back to what is ultimately the role of the teacher. And for us, it's, as Seymour Papert would say, is to create the conditions for invention rather than provide ready-made knowledge. And I think we all know as educators, that's really our future livelihood, our individuals' capacity to continue to be entrepreneurs, to continue to be inventors, to continue to think of innovative ways for us to live on a day-to-day basis, and to really stop and think about, is the current environment that we are providing for students, is it equipping them for those type of conditions? Or are we simply creating learners that wait for us to tell them the next thing? So again, just another great reflective quote that we hope kind of wraps and brings back around that first question that Nancy positioned around, what are we doing to empower students to want to own their own learning? It's one thing to say, do you want to own it? It's another for them to say, I want to own it. And for them to understand the power of that. So we do hope that you have enjoyed your time with us today. As Mitch mentioned, this is part 2 of a 3-part series. Our next Edchat session, which I think we have some information on the next slide, is going to focus a little bit more on for teachers. And again, it's how do you model for teachers the type of environments that you want to see happening in the classroom. So that will happen March 6th at 8 o'clock. We hope that you can join us back, share out with colleagues, anybody who you feel like would really be interested in kind of re-examining professional learning and what that looks like, not only at the school level, but the district level, just across the board. We hope that you can join us. And as Nancy mentioned, if you are interested in taking a deeper dive into any of the topics that we've discussed tonight, their book is available from the Harvard Education Press. You are able to get a 20% discount. There's the code LPDL17. Again, would love to, session 3, have a couple of folks who have maybe taken a dive into the book, completely optional. But if anything we have talked about really jumped out at you, it's a great way to just dig a little bit deeper into the research and the data that's out there. And last but not least, we always like to make you aware of other opportunities to engage with us at the Friday Institute. Nancy is going to be leading an amazing event in Portland, Oregon. If you've never been to Portland, that alone is a reason to go because it's just absolutely beautiful there in June. But it is a 2-day opportunity for building principals to come together. So we know you yourself may not be a building principal, but we would encourage you to maybe encourage your building principal. Or, Jesse, I know you work with, I think you said 14 different schools, but maybe encourage those administrators to consider joining us the 27th through the 29th, where we will really take a deep dive into a lot of the topics that we discussed here tonight, and they can get more information from our website. And
you've shown that when principals have mastered these, these different techniques, they really are significantly better off leading their schools, and the student achievement goes way up. Right? I mean, because I read the book.
Thank you. Thank you.
But it's also their capacity to grow within their own network,
right,
and to be able to be with like-minded educators who all have a passion for wanting to empower students, and to start to grow their own network and their own support capacity to be able to share ideas and continue to collaborate. And that's one of the things I love about leading schools, is that it is a highly interactive. It is not an event you can come to for 2 days and not interact and get to know people. You are immersed in collaborative learning from the second you walk through the door. So it really is just a great modeling experience, but also a great learning experience. Excellent. And last but not least, if you have any questions for Nancy and I, if you just want to touch base with us, if you want to probe us, ask us, more questions about things, by all means, you're welcome to reach out to us on Twitter or even follow us on Twitter. And we always have things going on. We're always putting out MOOCs and all types of great free resources available from the Friday Institute. So if you are not currently following us, reach out to us privately if you have any questions. And again, on behalf of Nancy and I, we cannot thank you enough for joining us this evening. We hope that you walked away with a couple of nuggets of information, things that you can take back and start to think about and reflect on as you think about how best to empower students to own their own learning and really capture the love of learner agency. So with
And
that,
we'll be posting the archive and the slides in about a week. So you can also share this with other people if you know other people who could take advantage of the information here. And please join us in a month for our. Let me get that slide back up on March 6th. Please join us then.
Thank Mitch for providing this great platform. It really is a wonderful platform. So thank you, Mitch, and thank you for having us on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And see you all next month. I hope you both have very happy Valentine's Days tomorrow. And everybody else. I hope you all have happy Valentine's Days and see you all soon. Okay. Take care. Okay, bye.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Okay, and this is Mitch Weisberg. I'm signing off for Edchat Interactive, and see you all in a few weeks. Bye.